Hi, everybody. Welcome. Hello. Hi, hi, hi.
Hello, hello.
See, everyone's filtering in. Good to see you. Welcome to the Zoom Minute. Welcome, welcome. Hi there, everybody. Hello.
Okay.
We're going
It's
to give
always
it a little bit for everyone to kind of filter in, get settled, make themselves cozy.
Yeah, in the meantime, we like to ask where people are coming in from, if it's your first knit along, if it's your first hat. I feel like we've been getting a lot of emails saying, this is going to be my first hat. We're ready to take you on this ride, joining in
Yeah.
the rounds.
Feel free to say hi in the chat. It's good to see where everyone comes in from. See.
New Jersey.
Hello, hello. Welcome if you're just joining. Hello, welcome.
First
Oh,
knit
Los
along.
Angeles. Yay, we're so glad you're here. Oh,
North
Florida.
San Diego, Scarsdale, New York. From Colorado, not first hat or call, but I thought this would be fun. Me
You're
too.
right. Welcome, welcome to everybody who's just joining. Welcome.
First knit along, first hat, Kenmore, Washington.
Oh, very nice.
Yes, this is for the veterans too.
That's right.
I think Gianna said she's made 11 of these before. Like this
Right?
is a popular hat.
It's
So
easy to make a lot of these. Hello to everybody just joining. Welcome to the Zoom Knit. Hi, hi, hi.
not
Say
first
hello in
hat
the chat.
to knitting with other people. I like that. Yes.
Oh, a second knit along both with Purl Soho. Thanks so much. That's so sweet to see. Welcome, welcome.
A knitting teacher and running my first knit along starting this Sunday. So excited to see how others run them.
Oh,
And
how
as
fun.
more excited to make another one, this time for my 4-month-old granddaughter. Very hype.
Aw, very sweet. Yeah, the baby sizes of this hat are so cute. I've been loving it. All right, what do you think, Jaja? You want to go ahead and get started? More people filter in.
I think we can go ahead and get started.
All right, all right. I'll add some spotlights to all of us, and let's see. Let's get the team up here. All right, give me just a sec. And all right, that's everybody. So welcome, everybody. Hello, we're so glad you're here. This is the first Zoom Knit for the Classic Ribbed Hat Knit Along. We're so excited to talk about these hats and everything you need to know to knit this hat. My name My name is Margaret. I'm the social media and outreach coordinator at Purl Soho, and I'm the host today. Co-hosting with me is Jaja, the customer service manager. And then we have Lily from our customer service team, Kat from our customer service team, Jess from our fulfillment team, and Gianna from our design team. They will be helping moderate in the chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. They'll be there to help you out, get you your answers. So yeah, thank you everyone for helping me run the Zoom. These are always so fun.
Indeed. Now, I asked earlier if this was anybody's first hat. And the reason I asked is because, we've been getting a lot of people asking. And it made me think and reflect on when I first started knitting, which wasn't too long ago. Like, I actually started knitting about, I guess, 7 years at this point. When I know some people have been doing it since childhood, things like that. I didn't get that head start, but that's okay. And I remembered when I was learning to knit for the first time with a friend, she was giving out lessons. She asked me, what do you want to knit? Like, what are your goals? And I never really thought about that before. So I threw out some things like, oh, some sweaters would be nice, and like hats, all the most complicated things. And she just gently nodded her head, like, start with some rectangles. So after many, many a rectangle, I finally was like, I need to make a hat though. I want something real, something I can wear and use often. And so crossing that milestone is just a huge thing for people that are learning. And it's really not that hard once you do it. I know it's definitely intimidating switching from straight to circular needles, but we're already excited to show you. And that's why we think this pattern is really good for first-time hat makers, just because it goes through all the necessary steps from joining in the round, working with circular needles, doing that decrease for the crown, what that means, a crown, all those little tips and tricks and how to make it easier.
Yeah, this is a great pattern for any skill level, and it's a beautiful hat at the end of the day. So that makes it really accessible. But this pattern is also very special to me because all those years ago before I worked at Purl Soho, this was my first ever Purl Soho pattern that I knit. So it's personally special to me. I'm very excited to kind of have a full circle moment to get to share the joys of this hat with you all today. So it's a great moment. But we have a lot we plan to cover today. We are going to talk about most everything you need to know to knit this hat. So you can join the Zoom in it, or you can reference the recording later to take you through each step of the journey. So we're going to talk about casting on, joining in the round, gauge, switching between knit and purl, stripes, magic loop, like everything you need to know for this hat. So yes.
Yes, we're going to do that too.
Yes, definitely talk about magic loop. We've got it all. So feel free to put your questions in the chat. We will have a Q&A section at the end to address some more like in-depth questions. And if we have time, we'll do show and tell as well. But our next Zoom in it at the end of the knit along, we'll also have a much fuller time for show and tell. So we'll be sure to see your hats, whether it's this time or next time. So yeah.
If you guys have any immediate questions, again, feel free to put them in the chat. We recommend putting it in the general meeting group chat, not directly messaging. It's called DMing myself or Margaret, because it's more difficult for us to see it and respond right away. That's why we have our moderators. I'm not sure where they appear to you guys. It's kind of like Brady Bunch over here. But they'll be able to help you and add links when possible. But if there's something more complicated specifically for your hat, say, I think one of the most common things I've seen is, oh, they're ready to start the decreases and they have the wrong number of stitches that they casted on, something like that. That's better to email us directly at customerservice@purlsoho.com or knitalong@purlsoho.com. And we can even do one-on-ones where we meet over Zoom if it's really, really tricky. So I recommend sitting back, watching what we've got. And if you've got any questions, either save them till the end because we'll have an extra Q&A session, or just putting them in the chat and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, we're also recording this Zoom in it for anyone who couldn't join us live and to use as a resource as you work on your project. If you don't wish to be recorded, this recording will go on our YouTube channel. But if you don't wish to be recorded, you can mute yourself and turn off your camera. But I think we can go ahead and get started. I think we're ready.
Yes, that's good.
So,
let's go through it.
I'm going to switch everybody around here, give that little technical shuffle here. And switch over to my document camera and we can start talking about this hat and all the things that we need for it. So, all right, so here is our hat. I wanted to give a quick overview of the project so that if you're just starting out, not really sure what it means to knit a hat, you have all the skills that you need for this project and also can kind of see them in a hat. So just to kind of walk us through the process to set the stage for what we're going to talk about. This hat comes together by casting on, and you'll cast on along this circumference right here. And then you'll knit in a tube, working 1 by 1 rib, meaning knit 1, purl 1 for the entire tube. And then once you reach the top of the hat with a little bit left, you'll start doing decreases to create this spiral that shapes the crown of the hat. And these simple knit 2 together decreases take 1 stitch away each time and help create a nice smooth taper for the crown of the hat. So from cast on through the tube and then the decreases and then the very end, running that last thread of yarn through there and pulling it tight to cinch the hat together. That's how this hat is shaped. That's how it comes together. So first step, whether you've started or not, is to do a gauge swatch, which gauge is something that if you're a knitter, you've probably encountered it in your previous patterns. Whether you've knit a gauge swatch or not, that's okay. That can be between us. But yes,
That's okay.
If you've started a project and then realized, oh no, I needed to knit a gauge swatch, it's okay. So gauge is essentially, if you're not familiar with gauge, if you haven't encountered it in your pattern so far, gauge is simply the amount of stitches per inch and then the rows per inch. And the idea is that if you have the same number of stitches and rows per inch as listed in the pattern, your fitted garment or accessory will turn out at the same dimensions and fit as listed in the pattern. For this pattern, I don't know it off the top of my head. I believe it's 32 stitches for 4 inches. Yep, 32 stitches and 33 rounds equals 4 inches. So I wanted to show real quick how to measure it. And you can measure this from, if you've already started knitting your hat, you can measure this from what you've already knit, or you can knit a separate swatch. We have a full tutorial called All About Gauge if you're interested for some more in-depth gauge talk, but it is a little bit different. Measuring gauge is a little different for, let's see if I can adjust this light at all, for the ribbing. When you're doing 1x1 rib, let's see. Wow, that's really not focusing. There we go. Okay, so when you're measuring in rib, the stitches are kind of hidden. So in here, it would look like a normal stockinette. We'd have these columns of stitches that we would count. In ribbing, there's actually a secret stitch hidden behind there because on the wrong side, that stitch is showing up as a stockinette, column of V's on the other side. So when you're measuring gauge in ribbing, it helps to count. Let's see if we were counting right here. This would be 1, stitch number 1, and then in here would be 2. This is 3, and here is 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. And you would measure over 4 inches. And then if you have, let's see, this is the part that always trips me up. If you have a more stitches per inch, help me out, Jaja. If you have more stitches per inch than needed, you need to go down a needle size. And if you have less stitches per inch, you need to go up a needle size. Is that right?
Because basically, if you're
It's a mind game.
if you get like 34, that means you're getting too much within that range.
Yes.
That's more dramatic. Let's say 35. You should be getting 32, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I have 35, 36. That means you're knitting too small, because you've got too many stitches in there. So in order to knit it bigger, you would have to go the opposite. You need a bigger needle. If you've got 30 stitches, that means you're knitting too big and you want to go down a size.
Down a needle size. Yep.
Size.
Yeah. So we recommend measuring from what you've knit already, just to make sure you're on track. But Jaja's going to talk a little bit about cashmere and the unique quality.
Yeah, so cashmere real bloom. Let's go back and put my face on screen.
I got you.
Obviously, we think this is one of the best yarns we carry because it's got that perfect medium of both cashmere. Everybody wants to work with cashmere, and merino wool, which is one of the softest wools in existence. So we combine them, and then there's the bloom. And the bloom actually literally means that once it you work with it, and also after you block it, it grows, and we call it blooming. And the stitches tend to fluff up a little bit. And this is another reason why it's really important to you might be wondering why a DK weight like this has a US 3 needle, which is really small, and it's because you really want a tight fit for the rib on this, because over time, like, it's just going to keep stretching and stretching. So like, also it really helps if you haven't woven it in yet. You might see that, oh, it looks a little pointy, but after you block it, it helps make it more round, and it's a lot more gentle looking. So it is good to block it. Normally I wouldn't block a hat, but I feel like it adds to the fluffiness of this yarn. It's got a lot of body and drape, and I love when you get to the point about like 5 inches in where it starts to get a little less dense and just more
So soft.
Yes. So it's
Yeah.
got the drape, it's got the, Margaret was laughing when I said the body yaddy yaddy. It's just got such a good stretch. And I actually made an adult medium for myself. And normally I don't wear hats. I'm probably still not gonna wear a hat because of the way I tend to wear my hair. I've got the fro going on.
Beautiful hair.
Just for reference, I wanted to show you guys just how much it stretches, that it can fit even when I've got this on.
Yes. It's an incredible stretch.
Obviously I wouldn't actually wear it like this, but
yeah.
So if ever in doubt, I'd always try to make it a little smaller than a little bigger.
Yeah.
Just for reference.
Yeah.
One more thing I want to talk about cashmere and bloom is the halo quality.
Yes.
In particular has this thing called a halo, where let me see if I can switch to my camera so you can see it a little better. Oh, there you go. Where it just kind of hovers. If you look at the tip of the yarn, there's something called a little halo. And yes, it could be more susceptible to pilling over time because it's so soft, but it also just adds this extra insulating warmth. It's really gentle and soft and not itchy. So if you're wondering what that is, we call it a halo.
Yes, perfect for a hat.
Yes.
Yeah, so let's say you've cast on already and you measured your gauge, you're happy with how things going. Great. If you haven't cast on already, we wanted to show some different ways to start depending on what types of needles you're using. So this hat uses a long tail cast on.
I did want to mention, I see a question that I didn't bring up because someone was asking if we need to knit a gauge in the round or flat. Definitely in the round for this pattern. Honestly, I would recommend, what I've been recommending to people is to just start this hat in the round. And if it's not coming out right, to restart it before you get the full 4 inches. I think you can kind of tell about 2 inches in whether or not it's at gauge. Just because the process to knit ribbing in the round for just a swatch, you may as well just cast on and try it right away.
Yeah. And we do have a tutorial for swatching in the round. Maybe one of our moderators can grab that for us. Yeah. But yeah, if you're going to do a dedicated swatching in the round is a good idea, especially because this hat is knit in the round. But and sometimes, especially switching between knit and purl, your tension will change. And especially adding another layer of being in the round versus flat, that'll change the tension as well. But to make it straightforward, measure from what you've knit so far and just keep on going. That's my best recommendation.
Oh, actually, this is another question that I think is a good one that just came in to talk about.
Yeah.
Sizing doesn't make sense. Is your head circumference the unstretched or stretched measurement? Usually hats will have something called negative ease. You usually want to measure the full widest part of your head. Then you want to do something that's 1 to 2 inches smaller than that. And so you want to make sure the stretched circumference can reach that amount.
We do list in the pattern it comfortably stretches to approximately, and it gives some size ranges. So the finished circumference of the actual hat will be smaller than the stretched circumference when wearing the hat. And we list both the measurements in the pattern to reference. Yeah.
So for, I think 21 inches, 21, 22 is the average size for an adult head.
Yep.
That's why when you see 16 inches for the unstretched, it's like, that's not going to fit anybody, but 16 inches right here.
It does.
But that's how you find what works for you. And if you have any questions about finding the correct range, just let us know.
Yeah. All right, so Jaja, take it away. We're going to start off talking about a long tail cast on good old fashioned 16-inch circular needles and show how to do that. So I'm going to remove my spotlight here.
So I mentioned my rectangles earlier. And if you're just starting out knitting, you're probably going to start on straight needles, which I don't have one right next to me, but you've probably seen them where there's one here and something on the end, another here, something on the other end to keep its stitches from falling off. The benefit of the circular needles is that basically the 2 ends you could think of perpetually going on. It's a circle, so nothing falls off. You're just going to be working with the 2 here, but when you're casting on for the first time, you might be confused how that all comes together. So for the demonstration purposes, I'm going to use plenty because that's a little bigger. Go ahead. Oh, wow, that really comes out much bigger. Yes. Plenty is a heavy worsted, but just to show you quicker, we have a tutorial for a regular long tail cast on. I'm just going to go through the basics here, but I recommend looking at that tutorial if you just want an idea of how to do it and you forget the steps. But as always, we start with slip knot. In terms of how much to pull, I like to leave about enough of a tail for weaving and ends. And then I take about 3 times, at least 3 times the width of whatever the circumference is going to be of what you're making. So we can't see the full thing here, but I'm grabbing about the 22 inches 3 times. And
it helps to be generous here.
Off screen, it's very generous on this pulling. We'll take a little more. I'd always rather have a little more than not enough and have to restart entirely. I can always cut that off.
Yep.
So the way I like to make slip knot, I go like this. Again, that'll be much slower in the video. You grab 1 tip. I like to have the working yarn from the ball towards my left and the one that's going to be part of the tail towards my right to separate them. You can kind of, I like to think of them as little pants. You're splitting the little legs to tighten
How
it.
cute.
You don't want it to be too tight. So if it's like this, that first round is gonna be really uncomfortable. So you can loosen it up, just stick it in there. Less is more. There are several ways to do this, but I like to, sorry, it's one of those like doing it slowly.
Right.
Grab the bottom three fingers. I'm like, what are these called? The top finger likes to hold the other one leg this way up. The other one, your thumb, is going to be putting it this way. And you can see I also kind of instinctively grab the other tail with these bottom three fingers just to give it the right tension. So we've got this V here. If you pull the V back, we've got this part here and this part here. So we're working with all of these. You're gonna go in from the bottom. Wow. Just gonna do it again, as I normally would. Go in from the top. And ring this through to make a loop. You might lose it. That's okay. You can just do it at any time. We've got a little bump here. That's going to be 2 stitches. When you're doing crochet, it's going to be counting as, this will count as 1, but it's different. So this is already 2. The slip stitch counts as your first stitch. So from the bottom, you're just going to go do the hole behind the top. This is going to create another loop. The purpose of this is not to really show the long tail cast on. I'm just mainly showing you for circular needles. So I'm going to go a little faster. I'm not going to do all of them, but for the adult medium, which is what I've mainly been doing, that one you're going to do. It's not right. See, now I'm like, I'm like, something feels wrong. I'm going to look away from the camera real quick. Start over. I'm like, wow, I can long tail cast on, right? I've done this. I've definitely lost count of how many times I've done this. There we go. I'm not doing anything weird, right, Margaret? Can you see?
Try grabbing the strand from your finger closest to your thumb right there. You did it right. Yep.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
There you go.
I'm like wanting to go here. I'm like, this seems weird. Oh, yeah. Okay. I was going way too far back, I think is what was going on.
There are
Wow.
some cast-ons that do make use of that
Yes, that's
loop.
why.
Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. We're all learning together. It's
On
good to
that
show.
It is easy to get confused. I'm like,
So
but I'm just gonna go ahead. You can talk. It'll be
I was
easier.
just going to say casting on circular needles is very similar to straight needles, where you just cast on the number that you need, and then the magic comes when you join in the round later, which we'll demonstrate in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not gonna do all of them, but I'm gonna keep going until I get to this other end. You want to make sure you don't get so close that it's gonna fall off this needle. So it's good to keep in touch. When I'm doing a lot, I like to do it, put a stitch marker every 20 stitches, just so I can easily count 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120. It also helps me keep track of my knits and my purls when I'm going in the round.
Yep. Yeah. And then the other thing, we can kind of start to transition here. Using the 16-inch circular needle is a great choice for the adult small, the adult medium, and the adult large. But for the smaller sizes, the amount of stitches to cast on will not fit comfortably on a 16-inch circular needle. So we are going to show how to use double-pointed needles and magic loop as alternatives. You could also use a 9-inch circular needle, which is my personal favorite, but even still, I have to scale down to the double-pointed needles towards the crown of the hat. So yeah.
And thank you, Sandra, for saying, I feel like sometimes when you go slow and think about it, it's harder.
Yes.
I'm gonna say what I just said.
I like that. Yep. Just don't think it. It's a lot easier. There you go.
I would keep going until it's enough that it's going to reach all the way around. But Margaret's going to show you another way of casting on for the baby hat or the toddler size if you want to do the double pointed needles.
Yes, so I have a set of double pointed needles here, and it's up to you whether you want to use 4 needles, 5 needles, however many you want to use. I'm trying to focus. Give me a second. There we go. Okay, but I'm going to quickly show you how to cast on with double pointed needles if you'd like to knit the whole hat on double pointed needles from start to finish. This is a great option if you are like traveling somewhere and don't want to have to think about all the different needles you're going to have to bring for your project and just want to grab one thing to start, or one set of needles to take along with you. So I've got my slip knot here, and I'm going to thread my first, make sure those don't roll. I've just got my first needle ready to go, leaving a little bit of extra space so that we can come back and work that stitch later. And then I'm going to make my slingshot formation here for the long tail cast on. This yarn in the back is the working yarn connected to the ball of yarn, and this yarn is the tail, the long tail. So I'll make my slingshot formation here, and then we'll just start going. And it's up to you how many needles you'd like to use. If you're making a larger hat and want to start and finish the whole thing on double pointed needles, I suggest using 4 needles, 4 double pointed needles, and then using the 5th double pointed needle as your working needle. If you're making a smaller hat like the baby hat, then I would say you could just settle for using 3, because at the end of the day you'll have a triangle formed with all of your stitches working in a circle. So it's up to you whether you want a larger circumference like that, or a smaller one. Okay, let me throw my needles around here, excuse me. So we have the first needle cast on. Now the question is, how do we go to the second needle? And some knitters like to cast on all of their stitches on one needle and then slip them onto other needles, which is fine. You can do that if that feels comfortable for you. For me, I just don't, that's not my preference. So I'm going to show you kind of what I do, which is a little, I don't know. This is a Margaret original here. So what I like to do is I hold the first needle in my hand, and this is the second needle that we'll be casting on to, and I kind of hold them parallel in my hand with the second needle out in front. And then we can kind of wiggle these down so that they're comfortable distance from the end without being too close. And then I will just use my double point needle to do another long tail cast on, making sure it slides right on that back needle. I'm trying to flip this over so you can see it. Just like that. And that way there's no weird space between those 2 stitches. So I'll show that again just to help you bridge that gap, because you can use this for all the forthcoming needles. So I've got these 2 in my hands kind of together. And then I'm going to just do a long tail cast on 1 stitch on that parallel needle, and then I'll just keep going. Just like so. And then as you continue to cast on, and I'm just doing a small amount of stitches just to show here. But for these hats, you could divide it up, 120 stitches divided by 4, that kind of thing. Same thing applies when you go to the next needle. Just hold this next one. You can let the last one go. And it's a little tricky at first. The hardest part of double pointed needles is really just the first round or 2. It's after that, smooth sailing. Once you've got a nice fabric established, it really helps itself stay. Oh, there's a little bump there. It helps itself stay in place. I don't know what happened there. There we go. Okay. But yeah, you just cast on, and then I like holding these 2 together just so that everything's in place. And then let's say we've cast on all of our stitches. You can kind of see, let me get this out of the way so we can actually see what we're doing here. We will have a circle come available, and that's where we'll join in the round between this last needle here and this needle. And we will use this last working needle to do it. And you can, I see a question in the chat, that long even for tapering at the top. I definitely, we'll talk about this in a little bit. I'll show how to switch to double pointed needles once you get to the top of the hat. But as you decrease and have fewer and fewer stitches on your needles, you'll definitely want to start switching to double pointed needles so that you can work with the smaller circumference as you decrease more and more stitches. So yeah, that's double pointed needles. We have a full tutorial, so you can feel really confident working on those if that's what you'd like to use for this project or when you need to use this for the project. But to get started, it's pretty straightforward. Yeah. So I think next, Jaja's going to show us how to use Magic Loop. If you prefer to do Magic Loop, lots of options with this Zoom in it.
So I do like Magic Loop whenever I can. So I'm really excited to show this. We have a tutorial for this as well, which goes slower. For this, I'm going to use this red plenty again, just so it's a little bigger. Now, the important thing about Magic Loop, if you've never used it before, is that you want to use a cord that is at least 32 inches long. So this is a 32-inch cord. I find personally 40-inch, actually, I think this is 40 inch. I think this is 40 inches right now. 40 inches is a lot more comfortable, but at least 32 in case you're curious what the minimum is. The reason is why is because you're going to want to have enough extra bit at the end, some extra slack in order to maneuver around a smaller circumference. I'll show you how it works, how it's so flexible, all the good stuff.
That extra length at the end is the Magic Loop.
Yes, that
it becomes the loop. Yes.
This is great for all kinds of circumferences, really custom circumferences. If you want to do fingers on gloves, this is Magic Loop is a great way to do that. In case you don't like double pointed needles, you find them too finicky, because you just need one cable for it. You can switch between just, say if you're doing a mitten, between doing that in the round, a smaller circumference, to just doing the fingers, you know? So for this example, I'm going to cast on 20 stitches. So I'll start with my little slip knot. We're just going to take one end and you're going to cast on normally. So I'm just going to cast on 20 stitches. It can be any number of stitches. That is up to you for whatever your pattern says. It can be an odd number, it can be even. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Another thing I wanted to mention about Magic Loop and why it's so cool is that you can do the entire hat in Magic Loop if you'd like. So from beginning to end, if you'd like to cast on, I'm going to show you how to cast on. Later on, I'm going to show you how to transition from a 16-inch circular needle to Magic Loop for the crown decreases. But if you do like, you can just use it for the whole thing. Personally, I like to do 16 inches for as long as I can and then switch to Magic Loop, just because it's faster. This is quite frankly. So this is the part. We've got 20 stitches. We're going to move it to about the middle, right around here of the cord. And then you want to find about the halfway point. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is the part that, again, does not have to be exact. You can change this. Say if it's 11, 12, you lose your point. It like gets too close together. That's fine. But generally, it's good to just even eyeball the halfway point. So you want to spread it and put it in half.
And there's the Magic Loop.
Yes, this is the Magic Loop. So it's probably wondering, like, what is going on here? Things I want to warn about Magic Loop in advance are ladders. Because this part is going to be stretched out, it's pretty likely when you're uncomfortable with this technique, starting for the first time, to develop a ladder right around here and here, which is going to be where we're joining for the beginning. I'll talk about more about ladders later, but I just wanted you to see how stretched out it is and all this stuff. So we've got, sorry that the camera only goes so far. But if we do it like this, and you can see the tips towards the left, the next step is to kind of push them up towards the needles. This is the part that gets confusing, how to orient. The trick is you're always going to want your working yarn to be on the right needle, but you don't want it to be pushed up all the way. You want enough slack because we need to be able to bend this. You want your first stitch where you're going to start to be on the left, pushed up towards the tip. So kind of like, I like to think of it as mini straight needles. So you know how you're working from the left all the time whenever you're starting a row. So you always want the left stitches, the left hand needle to be the start of the row. So we're gonna pull this so that there's enough slack so we can come around and bend it. And there's gonna be this loop here that's really big. We're just gonna ignore that. Ignore it for now. It's what creates the magic. So I'm gonna grab my little working yarn. It's pretty long, actually, it's not little. Like to make sure my purl bumps are on the bottom so that we're not crossing over, twisting stitches. And I'm just going to start. And Margaret's going to show regular joining later. We did skip that, but just because I have the magic loop set up, I'm going to show this now. So I like to put my stitch to this first thing, grab this first, make my loop. And I want to make sure I like pull this yarn so that it's tight and there isn't that much slack. So it's okay to have this hole. It's okay, not too tight. It's like nice and even. When we go to the purls, we're gonna bring the yarn to the front. I'm gonna purl. And we're just gonna do whatever your pattern says to the end of this. I'm gonna show what to do with the other half in just a second. So as you're working with it, it's almost like, I like to think of them like butterfly wings. You'll have a loop here. You're gonna have another loop here.
That's such a great way to describe it. I love that.
It's right if you've got butterfly wings.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got this really long stretch here with the potential ladder. That's okay. You might want to do really tight, but you don't want to do it that tight. Okay. We've reached the end. Everything's on my right hand needle, like you would have straight knitting. Now bring it back and orient it so that we pull it. So the left is at the top again. So we want to start the other half. Squeeze. Now, one reason why you don't want the right at the top is because you literally can't knit like this. It's too tight. It's connected. So that's why right, you pull until you've got enough slack for your butterfly wing. We've got the medium, the halfway point. We've got working yarn here. And we can just work as usual. So I'll do this. Don't want to pull too tight, not too loose. I can do my purl. And I just go to the end. And once I do the two halves, that will complete a round. And I did want to talk about because you might lose track of what were you going to say, Margaret?
I was just going to say working on the front needle and the back needle, or left needle, right needle, depending on what you called them. That is one round.
Yes. So two halves, one whole. Now we've made a circle. So it's hard to see, but if you keep it close, you're starting a very small circle. So this is how you do magic loop.
Yeah.
But yes, if you grab a little thing, I like to put it at the beginning to make sure I don't lose it. And that way, when I've got the slack, it'll just stay there. So if you mess up and oh my gosh, it's like connected, where is it? You just pull it at the medium again, just poke it out. It is fine if it is not perfect. Because you'll know once you get to the marker when you've reached the end or beginning of the round. That's magic loop, or at least starting a project on magic loop.
All right.
Next, Margaret again.
Yep, popcorn. I'm going to show how to join in the round. So we've cast on our number of stitches on our desired needles, And I'm going to demonstrate how to do this on 16-inch circulars, but there's a couple things to keep in mind when joining the round. And we also have a stitch marker at play here. So we have to remember to put that stitch marker in to mark the beginning of the round. So the key here is that we want to make sure we do not twist our stitches. We don't want to create, or intentionally in this pattern, create a twisted band. We want our stitches to be a nice straight rectangle or tube. So the way I suggest doing that is I have my tail end here. Well, this is actually from a different type of cast on, but so when you do the long tail cast on, there will not be a tail. So this will just be the slip knot here. And then I like to do this little trick. It's a nice, easy little thing to do. Just trace these stitches all the way around and make sure that they do not twist, because that will make sure that they're all nice and flat and going to be knitting in a flat tube that has no twist or anything like that in it. If it is twisted, here is what that would look like, just so that you can get an idea. This is what a twist would look like. So we have our follows around, and then we see this goes underneath and back around here. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure everything's untwisted, and this applies to magic loop and double pointed needles as well. And then there we go. Okay, just checking the chat here. Yes, we'll just use a regular long tail cast on for the hat. This cast on currently on my needles is not the long tail cast on. There will not be a tail here. This will be your slip knot, and you'll have two pieces of yarn coming off this end. One of them will be attached to your ball of yarn, and one of them will be the excess for the long tail. So when it comes time to join the round, we're making sure we're not twisted. Next step is we're going to grab our stitch marker and place that on our right needle. This is our working needle attached to the working yarn. And next step is we're going to insert our needle, our right-hand needle, into the first stitch on the left needle. And we're going to use the working yarn, not the tail. We're going to use the working yarn and wrap that around. And there's our first knit stitch. We slide that off. And the stitch markers will stay on your needles. You'll slip it from needle to needle as you move up the rounds. This just helps to reference the beginning of the round. You don't want to rely on any of the tails to reference the beginning of the round, because as you get so far away, you might be like, oh, wait, was it over here? Was it over there? So it's really nice to have a stitch marker here to make sure you stay on track. So that's how to join the round. It's pretty easy. It's just one of those things where it's like, oh, that's how you do it? Like, oh, okay. So we wanted to demonstrate that. But the next thing that comes right up after you've joined in the round, your work, and you've got your tube established, is switching between knit and purl. So this pattern is knit in 1x1 rib, where it alternates between one knit stitch and one purl stitch. So in order to do that, you have to prepare your working yarn to be in the correct position. So when you knit, you like to have the yarn behind the needles ready to go to knit. When you purl, you need the yarn in front of the needles ready to go to purl. So in order to move from knitting to purling, we're going to take this yarn. I'm going to move my needles like this for a second. This yarn is currently the working yarn behind our needles. And we're going to move it between our needles to the front of the work. So that way it is prepared and ready to go for purling. So if we wanted to purl now, we could insert our needle, wrap around, and there's a purl stitch. Then when it comes time to knit again, we need our working yarn to be in the back. So we're going to move our working yarn between the needles into the back, insert our needle, and knit one stitch. Now, to demonstrate what it would look like, let's say you forgot, or, just like to see what would happen if you didn't reposition your yarn. If we went, so our yarn's in the back, we went to go purl this stitch, we would have to yarn over, which would unintentionally increase. We'd be creating a stitch right there. If I actually completed this purl, we would have, you can see it right there. That's an unintentional increase. We're not trying to increase in this hat. We're not trying to add more stitches right now. We're just trying to knit at the same number of stitches. So that's why we like to move move the yarn between the needles so that we can purl. So you kind of come into a rhythm. Just switch as you go, switching between knit and purl. So it's just an extra little step to do as you go through this hat. But yeah, then you have your knits and purls. And you can see your knits and purls represented. The purls will have this little bar across the base of the stitch, and the knits will have a V that helps you identify them. So like this is a knit stitch, this is a purl. And it's especially helpful on the first round to be able to identify, oh, was that a stitch? Was that a purl stitch? Was that a knit stitch? Because if you put this down, perhaps after casting on and then come back to it to finish your first row, it's like, oh my goodness, what one was I on? So you can see this is a knit stitch right here. This is a purl stitch right here. So yeah, that's joining the round and switching between knit and purl. So the rest of the hat is kind of up to you what you'd like to do in terms of color and fun. But if you're doing a base color, just one solid color, you're just going to keep knitting and purling, knit one, purl one, the entire tube of the hat until you reach the amount the height you need minus the crown. And we do offer some fun options for stripes in this pattern, which is so fun. I love the stripes. So Jaja's going to show us all about the stripes and how to change, to do color block stripes, all of that. So let's bring her back.
It's really interesting because I don't normally see striping and ribbing. It's a lot more common in stockinette stitch, and the reason is because I'm going to go ahead and show my screen. If you look at the thin stripes, it's a little easier to see, but whenever you're switching colors, knits and purls, you can see basically when you do the purl. It's more noticeable when you stretch it out, but basically there's this bit in between where it's not as seamless as when you're just doing stockinette, just knitting in the round. But I think it's still a really cool look for this pattern. And once I tried it, I couldn't stop just because it goes so much faster than when you're doing a solid color. My first hat was solid, and I feel like that took me forever. With this one, it was just, I'm just flying. It's just another one, another. So if you're doing the thin stripes, you're going to want to carry your yarn. There are several ways to do this, but let me go ahead and finish this one stitch. I always have this thing where I try not to end around the end of row marker unless I have a stitch stopper, because it always falls off. But if you look at the inside, you can kind of see, well, the way I'm doing it, I'm trying to make it as seamless as possible, but here's the tail. So I've basically been carrying the yarn up along this edge. When you are doing that, it looks like right now I should be doing another set of the high tide. So I'm going to go ahead and slip the marker. So if I were to just continue knitting like this, that would be fine. But you'll see there's going to be a longer float when I come back around and do it. So sometimes what I like to do is to lock it in place a little more. And the way you do that is to actually kind of twist it. Oh, sorry, I lost it. Twist it. So I like to make sure I go under. And that kind of helps lock it in place so that when I come back around, I will then put the lighter color under and it's locked. And that's how I get the floats that are just hardly there. So it's pretty simple. Just going to keep working as is. Keep it like that. However, if you're doing a thicker stripe, I did 4 colors for this one. I had fun with this.
Beautiful.
The pattern calls for you to not carry the yarn. The reason because you would see this floats longer. And so if you do it like this, you're just going to see, you're going to have more ends to weave in. Unfortunately, that's not a fan. I'm not a fan of that, but it just looks so much neater when you have these thicker stripes. And if you're using 4 colors like I am in this example too, it's just, it'd be too thick if you're carrying all 3 opposite colors at once. So I do recommend if you're doing the color block or the thicker stripes to, cut your losses and even at the end. And in case you're curious how to do it, it's basically like when you're joining a new ball of yarn in general. But I always like to see something for the first time, so I'll go ahead and purl this last pink stitch. When you're done with your last color, you want to cut to leave about, I like about 8 inches maybe. I kind of eye it enough to comfortably weave in an edge, end, not edge. There we go. That's nice. And then I have my fresh fig next.
Ooh, beautiful, beautiful.
Surprise.
Great color, Jaja.
Thank you. You want to leave enough to, like, again, weave in the opposite color, the new color. I start here. I like to hold, actually, this is the thing. I like to make sure, well, actually, no, since you're leaving this one's fine. But when you're coming back around, I just like to let you know that for the first 2 rounds after a color change, the first and last stitches are always going to be pretty loose. I recommend knitting them first, and then afterwards, just giving them a little tug, and it'll be fine. So for this one, I'm just going to insert my stitch, have it here. I'm a continental knitter, so I hold it in my left hand, and I just start knitting or do my knit stitch. So then I would do a purl stitch, and I'm already joined. Easy as that. But like I said, when you come back around, you can kind of see this one's already like loose, and it's like, oh goodness, I don't like that. If you could just go to grab your pink, just tug, voila, it's gone. But I swear, about two inches. I've never had it longer than two
stitches.
2 rounds. That after 2, it's like weird. It usually settles on in, and I don't have to keep tugging it.
Yeah.
So like down here, like they're totally fine. I don't have to keep tugging these, and you can just continue on. But yeah, that's stripes.
Yeah, stripes are so fun. I'm so glad we have those versions for this hat now. It's like it's a game changer. So
a lot of information.
Yes. After, let me move this around. Okay, there we go. After you've knit the whole body of your hat, it's time to start the crown, which is a very fitting name for the top of the hat where we start doing that spiral of decreases. So I'm going to show how to do that in just a second. There's lots of love in the chat for Jaja's colors. Those are, I totally agree. Those are beautiful.
Anybody want? It's fresh pickle, golden green, rosebud pink, and fresh fig.
Oh, lots of perfect. All right, so I'm going to switch us around. All right, so I have a baby hat here, which I'm obsessed with the baby hats. They're so fun. There we go. I have, let's see, I'm at the setup round. We're just going to imagine that this is a full length hat. This is just for the purposes of demonstration, but I'm almost done with the setup round. So if we pull up the pattern here just to reference, the setup round has you knit the first stitch and then remove the marker, knit the stitch, and then place the marker after that knit stitch. So this is my unique end of round marker here, and then I have my other along the way markers. So this is my unique one. I wanted to show what it means to place a marker on your needles. I know I just did this for joining the round, but just to demonstrate that again, we're just going to slide the stitch marker on just like that, and we'll slip this as we come to it. So this is the last, for the baby hat, last set of 7 stitches. And then I'm going to demonstrate how to do a knit 2 together as we near the marker. So for the baby size, you skip right down to all sizes, where the first thing you do is decrease by the markers. One thing that's important to point out here is that different sizes have different crown heights, which means that for an adult large hat, that hat's crown decreases over a larger area than the baby hat's crown does. And that's to fit the differently shaped heads. So as we get up here, we're now starting, this is next round under all sizes for the baby hat, the baby size. And just to demonstrate what we're going to do to knit two together in just a second, let me work up to the marker. The markers are literally as a marker to help flag the spot. Oh, okay, it's time to do something. So we're going to knit up to 2 stitches before the marker. Let me grab a little slack here.
Margaret, can you try using your autofocus? It's coming out a little blurry.
Yep, I was speed knitting there. There we go. Is that better?
Can you try bringing the knitting a little closer?
How's that?
Okay, it might be the halo, but
Okay.
let's
All
see if
right.
that happens. It's just a
So,
little dizzying for somebody. Just want to make sure.
okay. Oh no. Hopefully this is better. Okay, so we're at our marker and it's time to knit two together. So this is a very basic decrease. It's a very useful skill to have as a knitter. And what we're going to do is it's just like knitting 1 stitch, but instead of knitting 1, you're going to knit 2. So you'll see here that this is a row of knits and the row right here is purls. And we're going to essentially move this knit stitch in that direction by knitting 2 together. So these next 2 stitches, what we'll do is we'll insert our right needle into this first stitch here by the marker, and we're going to go through both stitches. So I have 2 stitches on my needle there. Just to show that again. Insert right through. So it's just like a normal knit stitch, but instead of going through 1 stitch, you go through 2. Then you wrap this yarn around and pull through the left where we went in. And that's a knit 2 together. You can see them overlapped. And there's 2 bumps right there. So those 2, what was 2 stitches, are now 1. Then we're just going to slip our marker and keep going. We're going to do the same thing at the next marker. But let's say as you're decreasing, you're like, oh my goodness, I have not enough stitches to span around my circulars. Kind of running out, and it's time to switch to double pointed needles. What I wanted to show is how to switch to double pointed needles after being on circulars. So I have my set of double pointed needles here, and we are going to just start knitting with them. We're going to leave this needle. I like to pull this right hand needle that was our working needle. I like to pull it out a little more just so that it's very clear to me as I'm working that is out with the old. Then I have my double pointed needle here, and I'm going to insert my needle into this first stitch on the left hand. I'm going to be careful of my tension here so that we don't unintentionally create any extra loose slack there. And this next stitch was a knit stitch, so I'm just going to start knitting. And then I'm kind of tugging, and then we have to go back to purl, so we're going to go between the needles there and purl. Oh, get all my fingers in the camera here. There we go. And so now I like to check in, just make sure that the tension isn't weird there. I see a question in the chat for adult sizes. Do you need to use double pointed needles? Yes, you'll eventually need to use either double pointed needles or magic loop as you get to the crown, because as you have fewer and fewer stitches, you just won't have enough stitches to span the width of the length of a circular needle. This is like, once you get down to 24 stitches, it's pretty hard to keep everything on there. So we highly recommend using double point needles or magic loop so that there's enough room for everything to slide around, nothing gets stretched out. Okay, I'm going to keep doing a couple more stitches here just to show. So the next stitch was a knit. Next stitch is a purl. And we'll see that eventually we're just going to work this circular needle out of the way. So after this round, all of the stitches will be on double pointed needles. So let me keep going here just to really show what that looks like.
While you're doing that, I can talk about the when you are giving the cord measurement, is that including the needle on too? Yes. Usually when you hear something 32 inches or 40-inch cable, that is including the needles on the cables.
Yep. Thank you, Jaja. That was another knit 2 together I got there. And then one thing I wanted to mention before you get into ladders, Jaja, is just making sure that the stitch markers stay on your needles. You don't want to do a stitch marker on the very end of a double point because it'll just fall off. So I always like to be intentional about where my stitches are and my stitch markers are so they stay on my double pointed needles. And you can always move stitches around on your double pointed needles so that everything stays where it needs to stay as you go through the decreases.
I know one thing you could do if you're good at keeping track is I usually just keep the stitch marker on in the middle for the double pointed needles. And then I know because of the multiple stitches that I'm doing, I'm going to do a knit two together at the end of the marker.
Oh, that's smart. Very smart.
At least for the 120, the adult medium, just because it's a very even multiple, usually in 8 or so, or something like that. And once I have 4 needles, it's just, well, it's coming.
Yep.
That way you don't have to worry about too many needles and sliding off and then having to, knit 2 together and then you've got 1 left awkwardly and you're just zhuzhing it over a bit.
Right. It can be a little bit of a wobble there at the end sometimes, but that's okay. Just power through. I see a question in the chat. Every row should be an even count. So you always start with the row with the knit and end with the purl. That is correct. Until you get to the crown. Every row of the initial body of the hat will start with the knit and end with the purl, and that will maintain that that ribbing, the 1x1 rib. Okay, I'm going to switch to the next needle here because this one's getting kind of full, and I'm trying to divvy these up evenly. So just to switch to the next needle, we'll just leave that on. I've slid those to the center so they don't have any risk of falling off. And now we're going to start using this needle number 2. So I'm just going to go ahead and start knitting. And again, we're moving our yarn between to prepare for purling. Still keeping that going. And then one little thing that I always think about as I work on these is that I don't know if you guys are familiar with music, but it's never really the first beat that establishes the tempo, it's the second beat. It's the same in knitting. It's never the first stitch, it's the second. So making sure the second stitch is nice and tight helps to lock in that first stitch and eliminate any ladders there. So it's just a helpful little thing to think about as you go. Keeping that tension nice and even around where you transition between needles. Josh, I don't know if you had anything to add about ladders there.
In my head, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to start knitting on my 2 and 4s, clapping.
Right. Right.
I was going to talk about the ladders while you're going through that. So ladders, I unfortunately don't have an example of what ladders look like, but they're really common when you're working with either transitioning to double pointing needles or magic loop, if you're not familiar with them. What they tend to look like are at those points of transition, either between like 2 double pointed needles or when you're doing that switch in between the middle of magic loop. There'll be this long stretch of stitches in between, almost like an accordion, and we call them the ladders. They look like little ladders that you can climb up. And the reason they happen, I like to talk about the reason they happen. Oh wow, sorry, we're already getting to 3:04, so
Yep.
Sorry, we knew this was going to be a demo heavy Zoom just because there's so much to cover, but they tend to last about an hour and a half. So we've only got one more thing, which is magic loop after this, and then weaving in cinching at the end.
Yeah. This will all be on YouTube if you can't stick around for the full time,
Yeah,
so you can always reference it later.
Head on out. But the ladders, I like to talk about why they happen. So as you're working through a singular round, you're using a certain amount of fiber. And usually when you're uncomfortable, learning a new technique, trying a new technique, they tend to be a little, you might knit tighter if you're not sure what you're doing. That's a natural reaction to kind of tense up, to like really knit tight to make sure, oh, I'm going to get this right. I don't want the stitches to fall off. And what happens is if you knit a row where you're transitioning really tight, there's going to be extra slack from the rest of the yarn you didn't use up. And so that extra slack adds up in that ladder. and you've got all this bouncy fabric that's just kind of there. So honestly, one of the best things to do is to try to be consistent with your tension, and that just takes practice. The good thing is that if it's not bigger than an inch, it usually blocks out pretty well and isn't that noticeable. But if you are seeing, just take a deep breath, go back a little bit, and just maybe practice the technique on a smaller set of stitches just to get it down first. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, and ladders can happen with magic loop as well. But
even regular circulars, if you're just pretty much anywhere there's a join.
Yeah. Just wanted to point out here how it's
I like that. Someone said you might think of a ladder as a run in your hose. Yes,
yes, exactly. That's
stockings get the little tear.
That's such a pleasant way to think of it. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to point out here that we're almost running out of my needle, my circular needle. So we're almost fully transitioned to the double pointed needles. I've been knitting like the wind over here.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping up my knit two togethers here. And making sure all my stitch markers are nice and secure within my needles, or within the stitches on my needles. And almost there, and then I'll turn this right side in, and there we go. So, oh, there we go. So that's my empty circular needle, and here's my project on double pointed needles. So that is, we're ready to go. So the next step would be to leave this needle where it is and grab yet another needle to continue the work. So we're going to use the empty needle and just start going. So we'll just keep on cruising. If you ever set down your knitting and you're like, oh no, where did I leave off? I don't remember. The working yarn is always going to be hanging off of your right needle. And so if it's at the end of one of these main needles, that just means you're ready to start the one to the left of it with the spare needle. But yeah, I think we can stop that there. So that's how you switch over to double pointed needles.
Do you have a unique marker to show the beginning of the round?
Yes, I do. It is this one right here. So you'll see the beginning of round is halfway through this needle for me. And that's so that I don't forget where I am.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't fall off.
If you guys, since we're going to be working with stitch markers at this point, just to help you guys spot it.
Yeah, or you can also use,
when in doubt, follow the tail.
Yes, you can always use a contrasting color of yarn instead of a stitch marker too. Yeah, and just to show, this is what it would look like if the stitch marker was at the end of the needle. If you moved it at all, it would fall off.
Someone's saying, do you use the same size needles for the crown decreases as you do for the main part of the hat?
Yes, you do.
Because I've had a hat before in Super Soft Merino where I transitioned to the crown and double pointed needles, and it was really noticeable when I'd used accidentally smaller needles once, and just the tip of the hat is just cinched in.
Yes.
So that can happen. So make sure you double check the number on it, and you want it to be a consistent tension as the rest of the body.
Yeah, that goes back to our conversation of gauge, making sure it's the same gauge all the way through the crown.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and do magic loop. We're just going to go right into it.
Yeah. So this is, instead of using double pointed needles at the end, what it would look like if you wanted to use magic loop at the end.
Yes. And I have this hat pretty much ready to go. I just wanted you to see, have a visual of from the body to the point at which it's really just too tight to comfortably knit on circular needles. If it's just flat, you can see it's not even
can you show that actually, Jaja, if you were trying to knit? I'm not suggesting you actually knit, but just to show what that looks like.
It's not comfortable for zhuzhing. I could probably one more round, but we're really stretched out.
Yeah.
We don't want to be this stretched out. We want to be comfortable.
And that'll help maintain tension.
Exactly.
Thank you.
So, I'm just going to put my beginning of round marker to the side real quick. I'm actually going to take it off because it's going to fall off otherwise. I'm going to take my 32 size 3 32-inch cable, and I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can. For this particular round, it is a decreased round, so for my size, I'm going to basically be doing the purl knit until the last 2 stitches and a knit 2 together. And I'm just going to do that for all of these until they're all on here. And then I'm just going to do the thing from Magic Loop before where I split it in half. So let's go. So I like to pull it out, like Margaret said before, where making sure it's not falling off. You can just kind of leave it there. You don't have to worry about the zhuzhing because it's
I
Magic
see
Loop.
a question in the chat. What is the advantage of using Magic Loop over circular needles? In this instance, using Magic Loop helps to accommodate a smaller circumference. So working with circular needles is great until you have too few stitches for the length of those needles. Using Magic Loop allows you to work with a smaller circumference. So like Jaja was saying earlier, like the finger of a glove or the thumb on a mitten, or in this case, the crown of the hat as we get to a much smaller and smaller amount of stitches.
So when I was talking about the zhuzhing, I'm at a point where I'm going like this if I
Yeah.
stayed at 16-inch, and it's impossible to get all the way down to how many do we end off with at the very end? 4, 8?
Let me count on my hat. I think we have 3, 6, 9. That's how many I have over here.
It's impossible to do 9 on a 16-inch. So you need either double pointed needles, Magic Loop, or even flexi flips. Oh, can you talk about the flexi flips?
Yes. Flexi flips are kind of a cool hybrid between a 9-inch circular needle and a double pointed needle. It's kind of like a double pointed needle with a shorter cord in the middle. And they're kind of a fun alternative. I think the moderators have a link they can put in the chat to those if you wanted to try them out. And I see another question. So with Magic Loop, you do not transfer to double pointed needles. That's correct, unless that's your preference. You do not need to go from Magic Loop to double pointed needles. Only time you need to go from one set of needles to double pointed needles is if you started with a 16-inch circular needle going to a double point.
Simply an alternative for the decreases.
Yeah, exactly.
And some people really don't like double pointed needles.
Yes.
Some people
Yes.
really don't like Magic Loops. Some people have really limited needles. They might not have a set of double pointed needles, but they have like a
32-inch,
longer
yeah.
cords, you know? So if
Right.
you wanna, so at this point it's getting a little tight. So I'm gonna pull a little more so I can start to do this. So it's kind of half on the 16-inch, half on my 32-inch. I'm gonna keep going until I get all of the ones from the 16-inch.
Another alternative to smaller needles, which you'll still need double pointed needles for these, but the 9-inch circulars that I've mentioned a couple times, those are great for the smaller hats like the baby hat. And if you really wanted to, you could go from a 16-inch circular to a 9-inch circular to Magic Loop or DPNs as you get towards the crown, but it'd probably be more straightforward to go from a 16-inch circular down to double pointed needles. As you
for this particular hat, but I have seen some hats that don't decrease that much, and instead they just like pull the thread through all like 32 stitches, and then it creates a different look at the top entirely. So instead of a spiral, you kind of have this concave, which is really interesting. Like the snow day hat uses, I'm a big fan of the snow day hat.
Me too.
No double pointing needles for that. You just decrease and it just looks really pillowy at the top, which is really nice and fun.
Yeah, this hat, the reason you have to use a different type of needle for the crown is because this hat's design has so many fewer stitches at the top. Some hats, you can just work until you're done and then thread your tail through those last stitches on your needle and pull it taut, and then that's the top of your hat. But this hat specifically has a really smooth taper all the way to the top, so that's why you need to accommodate that with different needles.
Sorry, still going through this. I timed myself too. I was like, I can do it in 4 minutes. Talking. But I just thought it would be important and useful to have the visual, even if you can't stay and you can watch the recording later to
Yeah.
see the transition from beginning to end. I'm almost there though. Here's the last set of repeats.
Yeah, it really is a personal preference. Whether you prefer double pointed needles or magic loop, it's just what you're more comfortable with. I'm seeing a
Oh,
question in the chat. I'm confused about the first row of crown shaping. Knit one, then put a new stitch marker and start doing purl one, knit one. Yep, you have that exactly correct. So that initial little shimmy is where you move the stitch marker one stitch to the left so that the new pattern can line up with the knit stitches at the end of your stitch markers instead of the purl stitches. So yep, knit one, put the marker next to that knit stitch, and then purl one, knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one, knit one. Yeah, looks like you're ready, Jaja. It's time for the magic.
right. So this is great because it's already kind of divvied up into the stitch markers, so I don't have to pay as much attention to the halfway point. I'm still gonna, this looks like the halfway point right here. So we're back to putting it in the middle. We want to, and this, I just have this facing this way. I'm gonna, this is the back, literally the back middle. Pull out this section. We've got butterfly. We don't have butterfly quite yet. We have butterflies ready. So want to make sure wherever you're going to start knitting next is on the left needle. So I'm going to push this towards the top. And I'm going to pull this up until it's comfortable enough for me to kind of loop around, have my magic loop, and start knitting. And the row that I'm doing right now, is just purl knit. So I'm just literally going to go into my purl knit position and I can start just like that. I don't want to go too tight. I don't want to go too loose, but I'm just going to keep doing that until I get to my halfway point, which is like halfway through this round. So all the way to here. Do that. This is the 32-inch instead of the 40-inch, so you can see the difference and how it's a little tighter. It's not as pronounced, but it's still possible. This is why the minimum 32 is required. But I only have a 32, a US 32-inch, not a 40. I prefer a 40.
Yeah, it's nice to have that extra wiggle room, but if your magic loop ever magically goes away, you can easily just fold your knitting in half and pop that loop back out again.
Exactly.
Feel that.
Slide my oh, see, there's something that I did, and this tends to happen. I forgot to put my beginning of round marker here. So that's an issue.
Next time around.
Next time. But I have to make a mental note when I do come back around for the second half to put it on there so that I don't leave it. Don't do what I did.
Sometimes it helps to put the stitch markers one stitch in from the end so that you don't have to worry about it falling off, either your DPNs or your magic loop. But yeah, it's personal preference. And if you want to just keep putting it back on there, then you can do that too.
Oh, I just realized you threw your thumb. That is, oh yeah, so I do purl through my thumb. I've like changed that over the years. I like to purl. It's, I don't know, it's one of those, you just try different things to go a little faster, but my purls, I can do it with this this upper finger, but I just it's funny once I see it, then once I remember that, I become self-conscious of it. But
right.
We're almost at this halfway point.
And this is very similar to what you demonstrated when we did the cast on, where you just reposition your working needles. Josh, I'll show us here in a second.
I'm not going to do the whole thing just because I think at this point we've got it.
Yeah.
Now there is, for example, a stitch marker here. Let's put it back so we don't forget it. So this tends to happen if you're working with a shorter loop. If it like attaches again, that's okay. But turn it. So where our working yarn is, working yarn's here. So that means we want to do this next. So that means this has to be up on the left. So where you got to go next, second half, up on the left needle, pull the right needle back until you have enough slack to come back around and loop. And
Yep.
and that is magic loop.
It's pretty magical.
It's very, once you get the concept and try it, it is so useful.
Definitely.
Yeah, there you go.
I really like knitting mittens on Magic Loop. It's a very streamlined process. So, all right. Is it all right if I go ahead and show the last step, Jaja?
Let's go.
You can keep knitting.
I
all
have
right.
to finish.
Yes, right? So,
so close.
Our last demo we have prepared is for what happens when you've decreased all the way down to the top of the hat. What do you do with those last stitches remaining on your needles? So I'm going to switch over to my camera here and demonstrate that. So I have my new obsession, the baby hat, and I am going to move things around here. Where did my needles go? There we go. So we would have, I like this one better. Okay. We would have just finished. This is kind of how it was. This was the last stitch that I knit in the round. So now the next step is to cut the yarn, which I've done, and we're going to thread it through all of these stitches at the top. So what I'll do first is I'll remove the stitch marker, this beginning of round stitch marker. We don't need that anymore. Put that in my pile. And then we can thread the tapestry needle. And the way I like to do this is to fold it over the eye and then pinch it and thread it through just like that. Kind of a nifty little trick.
So cool. I've
Yeah.
been using it lately.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Okay, so what we're gonna do is I'm going to do something to make my life easier here, which is before I start actually weaving this through, I'm going to thread this stitch from this needle onto this needle so that this needle doesn't fall off as I'm threading these around. So we're gonna do that just like so.
So you have less stitches to.
Yeah, just to make it a little bit easier. So now it's very clear, kind of moved things around a little bit so that my working yarn is coming off of this stitch and I'm going to start threading through here. All right, so we will slide this needle through, bring this needle back, and then I'm going to slip it onto my tapestry needle as just like I'm purling. That's just the way I like to do it. Slide it off. Same one here, slide it off. Then this needle we can discard, put over here, done with that. And then I'll just pull this yarn through. Then we'll go back around over here. Now we're working on this needle because it was next in the circle. Thread it through, just like that. Put that needle away, we're done with that one. This is a very satisfying step. And then I'm not pulling tight yet, we'll do that in a second. And then this is the last ones through here. Put that needle aside, and then there we go. So you can see before I pull this taut that all of our stitches have been thread onto this yarn. And then I'm just gonna pull it. Ta-da! There's the top of the hat. And then what I usually like to do, which this kind of gets into weaving in ends territory, but I like to go through, kind of identify that first stitch.
It came for the just now.
Oh, it became blurry.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. And then we'll talk about weaving in ends another time, but that's where you can start really finessing this, making sure it's nice and tight. You can tack down any little bumps going on. I don't know. You can just finesse it. But that is how you do the last step. No matter what size you're knitting, that's the last step. for the actual hat. And then after that, you can weave in ends and block, which we'll talk about next time. So yeah, but I think that brings us to our Q&A session.
Probably the easiest demonstration section we've had, I feel like, in any of our knit alongs, because
Yes.
this is there's so many new techniques to learn. But if we have any questions, if anybody has any questions before we head out, we'll try to answer them. If not, you can send that to us over email again. Don't want to keep you all because I know this one was longer than expected. But we appreciate those that stayed. We appreciate those that left too. It's okay. They were here at some point. So we're happy. Oh, you. Sorry, I see Amy in the chat. I didn't think you were gonna make it. Hi. Oh, cool. When can we view the recording? We're going to post that. We're going to save it, make sure it gets all the bells and whistles, but we usually post that within a week. We try our best to get that up. So if you're not already subscribed, we recommend subscribing to our channel. Someone will put it in the chat and you'll receive a notification as soon as it goes live. Not live, gets posted to our channel.
Yeah. Joshua, do we have any Q&A? Because I see we have Barbarina here raising her hand, so I want to get to her if we have.
Let me double check. Sorry, I was looking at the chat so much.
That's okay. You guys are so welcome. Thank you so much for your kindness in the chat. That's so sweet.
We only have one Q&A today. Flexi flips can replace magic loops. What sort of size would be needed? Still 16-inch. So flexi flips have, do I have them next to me? Do I have them? They're somewhere else. I'm sorry. Yes, they can replace magic loops. They're kind of a hybrid of double pointed needles and circular needles, so they have a little bendy section. There are 3 needles total, 2 of which hold your yarn, and the third is what you use to actually work with the yarn. Not 16-inch. They usually come in 6-inch or 8-inch size. It's kind of like double pointed needles. So yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the only question we have. So I'm glad we covered a lot. And so we can do a show and tell real quick for
all right.
Barbarina. Come on up.
Yeah. Add spotlight. There we go. And ask to unmute. Does that work? Can we hear you? Hi.
Hi there.
Oh, hello. We can hear you.
Okay. So, I mean, I've knit with double points my whole life and I just couldn't find size 3. So I was trying the magic loop, but I find I'm just ending up with one loop and I'm just going around in a ring. And when I get close to it, I just pull out another loop. So I'm confused as to the butterfly wing thing. How does that work?
That's if you, especially if you did what I did and you drop that first stitch marker, it helps to make clear which half you're on, which side of the pattern you're on. But if you do it like that, that's totally fine. And especially if you're doing like a circular pie shawl, eventually it's gonna become like that, where it's just gonna fill up the yarn the cable anyway. So that's totally fine. It's basically just, instead of keeping it in half the whole time, you're just gonna want to switch it at some point. But so long as that works for you, you can have the one magic loop. It's totally fine.
Okay, and I mean, I'll watch some YouTube videos, but I was just puzzled as to what the advantage of having the 2 loops. It's just so you have more clarity as to where you are. It's not a mechanical advantage.
Yes.
No, and also, oh, go ahead, Shada.
No,
I was just gonna say it maintains those. I like that, butterfly wings.
Yeah.
If you have your front and back needle, to pull that needle far out and then start knitting with the other one. So that creates that loop. So you have the loop on this side, you pull far out, and then start knitting. That helps create that loop.
So you're not having your 2 needles just next to each other like that. You've got a big bit of cord.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's not enough motion to knit it. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be too taut there. Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing is, it's possible to do 2 at a time socks, or is what we see, and you'll definitely need to separate it that way. So it helps to have the visual if you're doing 2 sleeves or 2 socks at a time.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you
Great
so
question.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. And I think we have Tina here for show and tell. If anyone wants to come up and say hi, let's see. We have Tina. Hello, hello. There we go. There we go. Hi, Tina. How are you?
Good. I'm doing that. I did the 16-inch to start,
Mm-hmm.
and then I did my 20 in the lighter purple. And then I wanted a brim to show the darker.
Yeah.
And once I'm doing the crown like you, I switch to the
Magic
Oh,
loop.
magic loop. And it just being able to pull it out and not have any pull, I'll maintain my tension.
Mm,
You
Okay, yeah.
know,
that's your
I
preference.
could do it on double points, but once I learned this, it is faster for me. And
Yeah.
I just love being able to have them on a single needle, not drop anything.
Right. It's so much
Yeah.
easier for storing in your bag too. Nothing's poking through anywhere or falling off. It's,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Can
I'm
you
ready
unwrap
for the
it for us?
crown.
Yes.
Oh,
Crocus bud and
Crocus bud and fresh fig.
okay, yes. Oh, those are really pretty.
beautiful.
I think I might try that one.
That's such a
I
good
know, I
idea
love
for
your
the,
colors too.
oh, thank you.
So it's a fun knit. So
We're so
I'll be
glad you're
making
enjoying
more
it.
definitely.
Oh, good. I can't wait to see them. Thanks for coming up and showing us your hat. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. We've hit the marker, I think. So
I think so.
Everyone's ready to go home, but you're already home, I hope.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for joining us and resuming it today. It was so fun. I'm glad we got to go through everything. We can't wait to see your finished hats the next one. The next meeting will be December 1st at 3 p.m. Eastern for our finished object party. You can sign up for that on our website now. And we'll be talking all about the weaving in ends, blocking, answering any questions, seeing your hats, announcing the giveaway winners. It'll be a party.
Still a lot to do.
Yes.
Still fun. And I talked about how the meeting is recorded. It will be posted as soon as we can. If you're not already subscribed, we recommend subscribing. If there's any questions you have later on, if you haven't started yet, you can email us at customerservice@purlsoho.com, knitalong@purlsoho.com, and we have the one-on-one project help, which is absolutely free. So there's so many ways to contact us. It's no excuse. Like, we're here.
Happy to help. Yep.
Yes.
I see a question. It's at 3 p.m. Eastern on December 1st. Not 5 p.m., 3 p.m. I thought people might have holiday parties to get to it. Yeah, another fun part of our knit-alongs are our along the way giveaways. You can upload a picture of your hat so far to our website. In the bottom it says our knit-alongs. You can click there and navigate to the landing page for the classic ribbed hat and upload your pictures. We want to see them. That'll get you an entry into the knit-along. Into the giveaways. And you can also post them on Instagram, hashtag Purl Soho KAL. It's really fun to scroll through that hashtag and see what other people are making. There's a link to that in the chat if you wanted to save that. And you can also email us at knitalong@purlsoho.com for any extra entries. We always love seeing what people are making. So yeah, I think the next giveaway is coming up this Friday. So very exciting. All right. Is that everything, Jaja? That's all of our last minute.
Yeah,
stuff?
I think there's one more question that just came in. How long will we have a discount on this yarn? If you signed up for the knit-along, you should have received an email that has the discount, and the discount does not expire. You can only use it once, but it does not expire. So if you wanted to do this much later, you can use it whenever you feel like it.
Yeah.
That's it. All right.
All right.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you next time. Happy knitting. Bye.